Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? This is your main man, Scot McKay, and I want to welcome you to another big episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. You can find me at Scot McKay on Twitter, Real Scot McKay on Instagram, Scot McKay on YouTube, and the Facebook group is at www.facebook.com/groups/Mountaintop Summit. And as always, the website for this show and all other things X and Y Communications is www.mountaintopsummit.com. With me today is a returning guest, someone I've known for a long, long time. She's pretty much the queen of sex, which is one hell of a title to bestow upon her. I don't know if she'll disagree, by the way. I think she'll probably take that one and run. But she has been proffering wonderful, accurate, valuable sex advice to both men and women and couples for years and years now. And she is the head honcho over at Personal Life Media, along with her husband, Tim. And her name is Susan Bratton. Susan, welcome back.
Hello, Mr. Scott. How are you today?
I am doing great, Your Majesty.
As the Queen, I thought I might want to adopt an attitude.
Right. Well, before we slip into tea time here, we probably had better get down to business, especially since we probably just lost our entire audience in the UK with that cheesy rendition of their accent. So back to good old America. And you're actually only sort of in America because you're in California.
That's right.
Yeah. It used to be Texas was a whole nother country. Now it's seeming more and more like Cali is a whole nother country. Huh?
It definitely does.
Yeah, really does. But this isn't that podcast. So we're going to focus on something a lot more interesting, which is the topic du jour. See, now I slipped in some France influence in there. Yeah.
Very international.
Probably just as cheesy. My French is horrible. After so many years on Earth, I still can't pronounce French right.
That's all right.
Yeah, I know, right? Unless I go to West Africa or go to France or certain parts of Canada. I probably didn't need it as much as the Spanish I took in school, so I probably made the right turn there.
Yeah, I think so. Very handy language.
But it isn't that podcast either. The more interesting topic we're going to talk about today, and I really do think this is going to pique the interest of a lot of people. We may even get some women to try to download this show and be a fly on the wall because of this one. How to be sexually attractive to lots of women. Now, on the surface, it seems like that's a pretty broad scope. We're going to paint kind of with a broad brushstroke here. But it really is a much more granular topic than people might think, because guys are thinking, hey, you know what? I would just like to find a girlfriend. I would just like to be someone who is sexually attractive to a woman every once in a while. But I'm not sure guys really give much thought to this idea of how to be sexually attractive in a way that is more so to a larger amount of women. Either that, you know, Susan, or some guys are thinking it's pretty binary. Either I'm sexy or I'm not. But there's a lot of wiggle room there, isn't there? No pun intended.
A tremendous amount of wiggle room. And it's interesting that there are some things that are extremely important to women. For example, when I ask my women, and I've got hundreds of thousands of women who follow me, and I do a lot of surveying and asking questions. And one of the things that is interesting is that for women, grooming is their number one desire in a male partner, lover. Number two is emotional connection. Number three is presence, being present with them. And those are the top three. And I want to talk about each one of those because I think that for a lot of guys, if you just say grooming, it's not enough detail.
Well, first of all, you know what, Susan? If you have hundreds of thousands of women following you, I think you've already got guys listening because they want to have that same situation. They want hundreds of thousands of women following them too, right?
They probably just want one. They'd be happy with one.
Hundreds of thousands may be overwhelming. Maybe hundreds. That would be good. It'd be good to be, the kind of guy who can run a concert and have women throw panties on stage, like Justin Bieber or Engelbert Humperdinck, somebody like that. That's what we all aspire to, at least in our minds. But I think in real life, you're probably absolutely 1,000% correct. We'd all really like to have the woman we want. But let's face it, when more women are interested in you, you have more women to choose from. Your probability of finding the right woman for you is a lot higher. So I like what you're saying. And I have to tell you, the first thing I thought of was grooming as well. And see, here's the thing. Based on the number of men I talk to, I'm always amazed by how many men either don't believe that grooming is all that important, or they don't want to believe that grooming is important. But I'm telling you what, guys, if you have gnarly brown teeth with like lunch still stuck in it because you didn't floss and you haven't bothered to check your breath lately, women are not going to be kissing you. They're not putting their mouth anywhere near yours. And if you have dirty, grimy, ragged fingernails, they're not going to let your hands anywhere near their bodies. Now, most of us would like to have our mouths and our hands all over the women we would like to have them all over with, and preferably with their consent. Absolutely with their consent. Can't joke around like that on this show. It's no joke. Your hair has to look like you're not homeless. If you can do something with your complexion, if you can trim your beard, if you can even make the whites of your eyes clearer, if you are clean, if you're wearing clean clothes, guys, I know we can't stand doing laundry, but if you're picking up old socks off the floor and recycling jeans about 4 or 5 times before you drag your nappy butt all the way over to the laundromat and get stuff done, it's not going to help how attractive you are to women.
Yeah, there's a really cute show on TV called Queer Eye. It used to be called Queer Eye for the straight guy, but now it's just called Queer Eye. They have more seasons, and all those guys do is take the person and give them good grooming, give them a haircut and a beard trim and eyebrows and ear hair and nose hairs and fingernails. And the other thing that they do is that they put them in correctly fitting clothing. And I think that for many men wear a lot of very ill-fitting, flappy, floppy, dumpy clothing. And that is also important. So it's not just the cleanliness piece of it. It's also that your clothing fits you well and looks good on your body. Women notice that level of detail. These are very simple things to do. And there are a lot of people, you can go into a Nordstrom or what have you, and a person will dress you and tell you what looks good on you. So if you just put your attention on that detail, I think it's very important. But there's another big piece to this kind of physicality that we're talking about. This is all very visual. It's very similar to how a man likes to see a woman in lingerie or a low-cut top or a short skirt. That's what his eye is drawn to. So if you can relate to the fact that you like to look at a beautiful woman in a sexy outfit, what turns a woman on for you is when you are well-groomed in well-fitting clothes. It's the same thing. So I think when you put it in that way, it's much more relatable for a guy. Like, we like lingerie? Oh, okay, I can do that.
One of the things I've noticed is women always like a man who's doing the best with what he's got.
Yeah.
That's almost more of a credit in a woman's eyes than being flat out movie star gorgeous. And I'll tell you, I think that's attributable to the simple fact that women like clean men who have their act together, because it demonstrates that they have that going on at a mental level, at the higher level in their life where they have everything handled. They understand the importance of their presence, as you're going to get to in a few minutes, I'm sure. And that just makes them seem more masculine in the way women define it. And the other thing that goes along with that is women really don't like a man who's quote unquote prettier than they are. They don't want a guy who's going to upstage them in the beauty department, but they do want that guy who has things handled and is clean and attractive and, more savory to touch and to be around and to get a whiff of than a guy who frankly isn't.
Now, there's another level of this, and I think it's very, very important. And this is what I notice out in the world. I'm always looking at the guys. I'm always looking at people, their dynamics, and how men show up in a room, how they carry themselves. And one of the things that I've noticed is that it is nearly impossible to find a man who's carrying himself in a way that sends me the signal that he thinks he's sexy.
Number one indicator of a man who is successful with women is he believes he should be successful with women. And you just corroborated that.
It's not even the kind of player thing. It's just a guy that in some way he has the ability to hold eye contact. He'll flirt with you. He's dressed in a way that shows off his muscles or his body. He's willing to engage with you in a playful banter. Those kinds of things. Most men, and I know in the Me Too #consent world, it's very edgy for men to flirt with women. And also, generally, men are a very poor judge of women's signals for her interest. They just can't read the signals. Women feel like they're broadcasting loud and clear to guys, I'm interested in you. I like you. And yet men miss this over and over. It's literally like they have on a tinfoil suit and they're deflecting all of the signals that women are sending out. So this is just the funniest thing. I wish that men had better radar for picking up women's interest signals. And I also wish men generally would be much more willing to embody a sexual persona, not a Lothario, not a, hey, baby, let's get it on kind of thing, but just more like.
You do that imitation almost too well.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad I did one accent well.
Yeah, right now, that would be able to get warmed up.
But I really do think that men could really benefit from bringing it a little bit more around their own sexiness.
Now, you're bringing up topics that have been talked about even in recent shows like playful banter and flirting.
Yeah.
And once again, we're reiterating the importance of men figuring this out and going for it a little bit. I've done Facebook Lives on it. It's talked about repeatedly in my programs like Invincible for Guys. This is the presence that you're talking about. And women crave it because finally, here's a guy who's going to take the lead, show some interest, and perhaps ironically to a lot of guys listening, that means women can get a clear signal from a man that he's interested. You know, my shining example is always a woman asking a man, is this a date? And the guy freaks out and freezes like a deer in the headlights because he's like, oh man, I've just been called out. Now I've got to admit that I'm attracted to her. You know, half the time at least. I would say it's a majority of the time, Susan. You can agree or disagree. She's just looking for clarification. I mean, did you just ask me out? Are you interested in me? Or is this a situation where if I think that I should reciprocate any sexual interest towards you, I'm likely just to be humiliated and embarrassed because you were thinking, hey, this is a chance for us to exchange business contacts or become friends or something. Generally speaking, women have no idea what's going on in the minds of men any more than we as men know what's going on in the minds of women. And what that leads to is a lot of misunderstanding. So the perhaps ironic part of all this, Susan, is we're all left not knowing what the other one's thinking, not being able to read the signals, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's confused, perhaps even frustrated in the end. Men and women who should have met and who would have liked each other, maybe perhaps even fallen in love and had a relationship, don't ever even meet because the man completely lacks this presence you're talking about. Whereas if he's confident that women will like him, if he makes his intentions known to a woman. And listen, that's not like, I would really like to screw you. That's not what I mean by that. He may definitely want to screw her, and there may be a time and place in the near future where he can throw that on the table. And by the way, there is. But like you noted, and I think rightly so, a lot of guys really are more skittish about the whole flirting, banter, even the presence thing nowadays because they're afraid of offending women. They're afraid of bothering women. But women who love men, women who aren't broken, aren't offended by a man who shows up as a heterosexual man and says, I desire you. He can give her respect. He can give her space. He should give her respect and he should give her space. That's actually a much more effective way to, wait for it, have lots of women be sexually attracted to you, right? That's a good way to do it. But men fumble. And I think it's caused in large part because the perception of a lot of women being angry or being bitter towards men, or somehow our very heterosexuality as men is inherently evil or bad or to be hidden, or at best something that we need to trick women into partaking of. But this whole conversation reminds me of something that I've told guys before. It's a little bit crass for the typical nature of this show, but I'm going to go ahead and spit it out because I think this particular mindset requires something very visceral to kick it into motion. Gentlemen, there are two types of people on this earth. People who like to suck cock and people who don't. You're not one of them, but she is. So you need to get it through your thick skull that women who are heterosexual and like men are glad you're a heterosexual man. Because if every man who was heterosexual was inherently evil because, or we were supposed to go hide our heterosexual masculinity, what are all the heterosexual women to do, right, Susan?
Yes. There's something
Did
else
I
that I
leave
wanted
the
to
great Susan Bratton speechless on that one?
No, it's a very difficult thing to respond to. One of the things I wanted to talk about with regard to presence is that
You're going to change the subject on me completely.
Well, I'm just going to add to what you were saying.
Okay. Okay, good. You can't leave me hanging on that one. I'm not going to allow you to. Go ahead.
What I mean by presence is that there's this difficult thing about being a guy where you're supposed to be the masculine leader and you're supposed to kind of hold the frame and you're supposed to have the vision and you're supposed to be able to take her on the ride, if you will. But the problem is that you're asked to do that, and then you're also asked to be present. And I think that's confusing because, well, wait a minute. I'm supposed to have the plan, but I'm supposed to be present. So how can I be present if I'm supposed to have the vision? Because you have to think ahead if you're the one with the plan. So how does that all work? It gets confusing. And really what that means is you have to have a general sense of being able to move a situation forward, but you don't have to be stuck with some plan that you're going to follow. You just have a general sense of wanting to lead a woman toward more pleasure, but being in the moment and reacting to wherever she is and whatever she's doing and having that be more interactive and a little more vulnerable. Like, okay, I'd like to ask you out and I want to make sure you know that I'm asking you out on a date. Are you up for it? Great. Okay. Would you like me to give you some ideas of things we could do and then you pick? A nice way to hold the frame, but to also ask for clarity is to give women lots of little offers. That way you're paying attention to who she is and how she's reacting to things and what's going on in the moment instead of having some pre-described idea of what you're going to do with her, so that you have both kind of the big picture at the same time. You're just right there in the moment with her, kind of shucking and jiving. And that's a good balance to strike as the man. Like, I've got ideas, but I'm also willing to know what you want to do and be reactive to what's going on in the moment. I hope that kind of clarifies I need to be the leader, but I need to be vulnerable. I need to be present, but I have to have a plan, because I think it does get confusing for men.
Well, I'm a little unclear on what the difference is between being present and having a plan, because in my mind, I could show up with a plan. And to kind of clarify my direction on that, what I would add to what you just talked about in terms of giving women offers or saying perhaps, here are several things we could do, you pick. In the spirit of leading and having a woman be pleased that you're a man with a plan, what I usually suggest to guys is that they listen, because women harp on men listening all the time, and guys are confused by that also. It's like, is this woman wanting me to obey her when she says listen? What I believe she means, and you can riff about this if you want, is that she wants a man to take an interest in knowing what her likes, dislikes, hopes, dreams, fears, and joys are, so that he can make an informed plan. Because if a guy listens to a woman asking her what kind of restaurants she likes, what she likes to do on weekends, then he can come up with a very specific plan that has her best interests in mind. Indeed, has her very interests in mind. And that way he can show up as a leader and also plan something that's going to likely delight the woman. And, still, that doesn't preclude the option of her taking it or leaving it. But at least the guy has something a little bit more focused. What do you think of that?
I think that's very well said.
I think this whole idea of presence really does confound a lot of men because we're used to performing. We're used to having to get a job done and get it done well under pressure because it's all about achievement. It's all about getting ahead. In many ways, it's all about competition for us in our male minds. And that's a good thing when it comes to providing and protecting. But when it comes to talking to women, I've said this for years, Susan, even the simple act of starting a conversation with a woman a man's never met before, a cold approach, if you will, renders itself in a man's mind as if it's a competition. She's either going to accept me or reject me. And if I get beat by a girl, oh my God, the shame, the tail between the legs shame if that happens. But that's not what women want or expect from us. They're simply seeing it as a conversation. And if we can come with a presence where we're letting our masculinity do the heavy lifting for us. We're comfortable that, hey, you know what? I'm a man, she's a woman. That part's going to take care of itself. And instead of being in my head worrying about screwing up so much and doing the wrong thing, or how am I going to say the right pickup line or put the right routine into motion here, it's simply watching, being observant, talking to a woman as a human being, and monitoring if she's getting more comfortable with me. How can I make her more comfortable with me? If she's a little skittish, help put her at ease. I always suggest to guys to ask themselves 2 questions whenever interacting with any woman. First of all, am I putting her at ease or am I making her uneasy? And the second one is, am I carrying her or is she carrying me? Because if she has to babysit my emotions and act like my mommy, she can't be my lover either. And that's something that will certainly make a lot of men be more attractive to a greater cross-section of women than if they don't understand that. And Susan, you mentioned a third factor that really makes or breaks a man in terms of being sexually attractive to a large number of women. And that was emotional connection. And as you uttered that third factor out loud, I couldn't help but think a lot of women talk about emotional availability in a man. And that seems kind of a hybridization of being present and having emotional connection. It seems like those two are kind of interrelated. What do you think?
Yeah, they definitely are. And I think for a lot of men, they start out at a sexual level being oriented toward the pleasure and the friction and the connection and that piece of it. And they don't have a lot of connection between their genitals and their heart. And the heart is an interesting thing. Your emotions are connected to your heart and your gut, but it takes some practice to open your heart and to feel love. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, men and women alike, people across the gender spectrum, they didn't grow up in a very loving household. They grew up, they didn't see their parents kissing or loving each other. They don't have a lot of love modeling. About 50% of Americans are considered to be poorly attachment parented. So half of the people that you interact with didn't get enough love, didn't see what love looks like. So for many men, they get into their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s and beyond, and they realize that they haven't really felt deep and connected love for themselves or for others. They love their mom and dad, they love their brothers and sisters, and that kind of thing, but it's not that really soulful, full-bodied, deeply emotional connection. And it's a learned skill. The heart muscle, if you think about it, I kind of describe it as a door. It's a door that when you open it and you allow yourself to go into feelings of love and you cultivate them, you think about what you love about a person and you start to care for them and you start to really love them, there is an opportunity for an extremely expansive awakening in that loving area of your emotional connection. And you can begin to also connect your penis with your heart. You can start to use your penis as an instrument of love. And when you're running love energy throughout your body, when your body is literally pulsing with love, when your penis is pulsing with love, when you are inside her and you're shooting love out of yourself and your body into her body, she's going to feel that. And the interesting thing about it is that I think a lot of people are they don't have the modeling for love, but they're afraid to love because they've been hurt before. Betrayal is one of the reasons that holds people up from having the connection and the sexual connection that they desire, because somewhere along the line they got hurt and they closed the door of their heart. And when you love, and you love deeply and fully, if something happens and that love is gone and you lose that love, it hurts as much as it did feel wonderful to love. It's the two sides of the same coin. When the heart expands and that door opens, it also, when it gets hurt, it hurts just as much. So there are a lot of people for whom either they never had love and they don't know what it's like, or they had love and then they had hurt and they were afraid to hurt again. And I don't know whether you're resonating with this and you can identify with one or the other of these things, but what I can tell you is that it is not a life worth living without a full, open heart that's connected to your cock. And when you have that, you can live through the pain and come out the other side. You can get over betrayals and sadness and heartbreaks. And you can go on to know that that was practice for your heart muscle, and that the opening and the contracting of your heart muscle, that's just like working a bicep. The more you do it, the better you get. So if you've ever been hurt, or if you've not been able to love, all you need to do is practice it, because the more that you have, the better it gets over time.
Well, I can resonate with what you're saying. And I also can fully understand how a lot of what you just spoke so eloquently about, Susan, might be very esoteric to a lot of guys listening. At the philosophical level, I've been aware of the premise for a couple of decades now that the opposite of love is not actually hate, but fear. So when you're fearing because you've been hurt or you've been damaged and you've slammed that door shut, what you're doing is you're missing out on a brave world out there full of joy, full of beauty that you're not experiencing. And that's the fear shutting out the love. And I think in many ways that sums up a lot of the beautiful things you were saying about what it's like to open that heart door and let love in. And that sounds really flowery and yin-yang-ish to a lot of guys, but there's some truth to it, because love is a great thing to experience, and male-female love, from the more objective perspective, is tied to our genitals. And you talked about your penis being an instrument of love, which probably prompted a chuckle or two from some of the guys listening, but I actually believe there's objective reality behind that statement. Guys, as crazy as it sounds, when you're making love to a woman, you can actually think a jolt of passion and positive concern for that woman, whatever you want to call it, through your penis, and she's likely to gasp or even squeal right when you do it. There's something metaphysical about that, but it's very real. You can quite literally think a jolt of passion through your penis as you're making love to a woman. That's a fact. And women are literally shocked. I mean, as if you jolted them literally. They'll look at you like, where did this man come from? It probably triggers the oxytocin a little bit in their body. There's most likely, this is all part of what I tend to lovingly call God's dirty little trick to get men and women to procreate and make babies and stay together and father them together. But there's something very real to that. And I wanted to totally underscore that before these guys thought, okay, well, McKay and Bratton have gone off on some woo-woo trail here and I'm kind of tuning it out. This isn't weird hippie shit, gentlemen. This is reality. And when you understand it, more women are sexually attracted to you. And that's the title of the whole show. Susan, we're running out of time, and I know you have a free gift for these guys that's particularly titillating, and I use that word intentionally. What do you got for them?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the voice of authority. There's something about the masculine that's very attractive to the woman because as testosterone-driven guys, you are very confident. Women being estrogen dominant, we are not as confident. We have a little more anxiety. It's difficult for us to get out of our heads and into our bodies. And so the voice of authority, where, again, it goes back to this kind of vision and presence where you're witnessing what's going on and you're telling them things are going to be okay. You're encouraging them to enjoy themselves with you. This kind of talking is very good for women. It makes them feel like you're emotionally connected to them. And then that can lead into dirty talk. And by dirty talk, I don't necessarily mean anything that is even a dirty word, even any cursing or anything nasty or naughty at all. What I really mean by dirty talk is the language of love, the language of calling things out. Oh, you look so beautiful to me. You're so sexy. I love your body. You turn me on. These are kind of voice of authority, encouragement / dirty talk types of things that women really like to hear. So I have an ebook, a downloadable ebook, and Scott will give you the URL. That is a little book about different ways you can talk dirty that women like, that put you into the masculine power seat and give you this ability to really lead her mind and turn her on. Understanding what kind of dirty talk she likes, giving her oral pleasure during lovemaking and during even dating, how to be kind of that big daddy that a lot of girls like, some ways you can do that, how to look at her body and tell her how much it means to you to look at her and how beautiful she is to you without you feeling weird. I give you the right language. So there's lots of ways to do dirty talk that women really love and don't gross them out, and that make you a better lover, more attractive, more desirable, and turn her on and get her going. And so that's my gift for you today, the Dirty Talk book that makes you more attractive to women.
You know, Susan, I have to say, you have this unique way of dropping innocuous phrases that are incredibly hard-hitting and could be whole podcast episodes by themselves. There's just no way right now we have time to dig into this idea of being her big daddy, but that needs to be a future topic for a whole show.
Oh my God.
That just conjured up a whole lot.
I'd love to talk about Big Daddy ravishing her, being masculine, taking some dominance in the bedroom. We should do that sometime. That's a good one. I know a lot about that.
Well, that's good. There you go. I'm glad you elaborate a little bit on that. Also, the term oral sex is extremely underutilized. You and I should take the lead in making sure that's promulgated all over the globe, because that's just such a beautiful phrase. That should be the title of your program on this. It should just be called oral sex, because it's just such a provocative term in a wonderfully horny way. Guys, if you want to get your hands on this particular ebook that is written by a woman, by the way, we've had dudes sit around and, pontificate about how to talk dirty to women. And hey, we know what we're talking about. We know what's worked for us. But to get a woman's perspective on this is absolutely golden. So I would recommend going to www.mountaintoppodcast.com/dirty talk. What else? DIRTYTALK, and get you some, because I know Susan's worked very diligently on this and she's very passionate about this subject. So when you go there and log in and get your copy of that, I'm sure you'll be very, very pleased. And you'll also be able to see the entire catalog from Personal Life Media that can help your sex life get to the next level, probably to a new height you've never achieved before, maybe even to the moon and back, wouldn't you say, Susan?
I like it.
Love her to the moon and back. What a great conversation. This took some twists and turns I really didn't expect, but lots of really good, solid revelations came from this, and I think the guys really will enjoy it. So thank you once again for returning to our show, Susan.
Aw, thanks for having me back, Scott. I always enjoy our time together.
Yeah, and you're so well-spoken and smart on this stuff. I love people who know their stuff. It's always such a joy. And I know I say that every once in a while on this show, but when I say it, I truly mean it.
Thank you.
So, excellent stuff there. And guys, I have something brand new for you also. I've added a brand new module to my classic program on approaching women, starting conversations with them, charming them, and making them want more of you. And that's called The Man's Approach. And the new module I've added is a collection of live recordings of in-field cold approaches that I've done over the years during 10 plus live weekends. 10 plus live, of course, is when guys come see me from all over the world, literally, for a 4-day intensive on how to get better with women. And we meet over 100 women typically during the course of those 4 days, well over 100 actually. And what I've done is I've recorded some of my conversations, including with a bartender, with younger women, with, hot mommy aged women, and with groups of women. I've opened groups of 3 women in this program. So if you already have The Man's Approach, please log into the members portal, and it will be found as the 4th extra value module. And you can also, as always, go to the show notes for the Mountaintop Podcast, which is www.mountaintoppodcast.com, where you'll find a way to get on my free newsletter, which will come at you every day with actionable advice free of charge. And you can also talk to me for 25 minutes, also free of charge, about whatever's on your mind. And if there's a coaching program that's right for you, either my 10 plus program or my brand new laser coaching program, then we can get you on board. And until the next episode, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.